Today, I want to visit with you about the differences between education and schooling. Hi, my name is Jackie, and I am the founder of Homeschool Think Tank and host of the Homeschool Think Tank Parenting Podcast. So this video is geared toward homeschooling parents, but I'm going to tell you, even if you're not a homeschooling parent, I think you're going to find this video or podcast episode really helpful. So I want to share a little bit with you about why I'm talking about this. So as a homeschooling parent, I think that sometimes when we start homeschooling our kids, or actually oftentimes, we start out by emulating the public education system in our homes. So we try to almost structure our homeschool day as though our children were doing public school at home. And what comes to mind for me is during COVID, people were doing public school at home and calling that homeschooling. And I'm here to tell you that is not homeschooling. That is doing school at home. Homeschooling, in my opinion, is extremely different than doing public school at home. And I'll go more into that in a different video. But what I want to help you realize and understand today is that there is a difference between education and schooling. Now, I want to tell you that I used to be a public school teacher. I was actually a physical education teacher, and I taught grades K through 5. And when I started teaching, I just loved teaching and I loved kids. Now, I'm going to tell you also, I was not born to be a PE teacher, but I did a good job and I enjoyed it. But when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, I started viewing the public education system very differently. I started seeing that system through a mother's eyes, and I started noticing things like the children spending so much time in line, kids having to wait to have their most basic needs met. They had to ask for permission to eat, to go to the bathroom, to speak. And these types of things started bothering me. And I didn't like it. I didn't like how the kids were all lined up all the time. And everything they did, it was this system, right? Which you have to have a system when you have hundreds of children under one roof. It makes sense. But what I really started questioning is, why do all these kids have to even be here? Can't they learn at home? And that is when I started distinguishing the differences between schooling and education. Now, in my opinion, education is more about the individual who is learning. They're learning about things they're interested in. They have a desire to learn. Schooling is more about the person who is teaching. With schooling, somebody else has decided what is important for you to learn and how you should learn it. And while I do believe that, our kids need to learn how to read, I'm here to tell you that if you just read to your kids, they're going to want to learn. They're going to want that education. You know, when you watch the news, you have questions about history or geography, where things are, or where places are in the world. Simply living life is educational. Now, as parents, we do want to offer more intentional education to our children, but it's not about the system. Schooling is very much about a system. And I see schooling as more than about the education that takes place in the system. There is this whole system that was created to create good employees. You know, and education has a lot of history behind it. But, you know, you're told what time basically to get up in the morning. You have to be here at this time. So there's a baseline, a minimum time frame. You have to be up in the morning. You're told when you need to eat. You're told what days you can have off. And now in the form of homework, we even tell our children what their evenings are going to look like. And not just children, but entire families. I believe schooling impacts families negatively in many ways because the family doesn't have time just to be a family. So what I want you to really think about is, like, what is education? And how did I experience education? In different cultures, we experience it differently. In different families, we experience it differently. In some families, your quote unquote education is everything. And other families, they're like, whatever, go to school, come home. And understand how children are being trained to wait, to be told what to do, what to learn. A lot of times our self-drive is stripped when in the public education system. There are just a lot of things happening. I'm going to glance at this blog post that I wrote. And by the way, check the link in this video or podcast episode, and you will find the blog post that goes with this, because I wrote down some questions I want you to ask yourself. So I feel that my role is not to tell you what to do, how to do things. It's to help you think things through for yourself that you may have always accepted as truths. You may have always accepted that school equals education. You maybe never even thought about it. So here are some questions for you to just ask yourself, and later rewind this, listen to them, write them down, and really ask yourself these questions and see what your brain comes up with. What is education? Why do we educate our kids? I'm going to tell you, I'm going to come back and answer a few of these questions, but I want to give you the opportunity to pause and think through this. Where does education take place? When should education happen? How should you educate your kids? And who tells us how to be educated? So I think these questions are really important to ask yourself, because it's going to just open up your mind and help you see how you've just sort of assumed education is, and start thinking about other ways that children can be educated. Because I'm here to tell you, some kids learn great in the traditional public education system. I was actually one of those kids, but I have a sister who is not one of those kids. The public education system was terrible for her. It was not the way she learns best, right? And my children learn differently. So if you have a child that's struggling with their quote unquote education, and you're trying to do things like school at home, that may be the cause of some of your problems, because education doesn't have to look like it does in school. All right, so, when I say what is education, now I see education as more about learning. It really is not about the teacher. Now, a teacher or a parent teacher, as a homeschooling parent, your job is to help open your children's minds, to make them, but to present ways that help them want to learn, to become interested in things. Where schooling is more about the teaching and it's about following what somebody else has set forth as important for you to learn. Why do we educate our kids? So on one level, when you look at schooling as education, we educate our kids or send our kids to school mostly because the government tells us to. There is a compulsory school age and you're told to do this. But why do we educate our kids? Why do we want them to be educated? That's because we want to help them survive and thrive in this world. We want them to learn the things that will help them in their futures. Where does education take place? Again, you can look at this in two ways. When you look at it as schooling, when you think education equals schooling, then education takes place at school. But I'm here to tell you, education takes place from the very first moment you take your very first breath. Education is happening all of the time. Sometimes we're more intentional about our education than other times, but every experience you have in this world is a bit of your education. Every conversation you have in this world is some of your education. When you want to learn something and you go out of your way to learn it, that is part of your education. When somebody else brings something for you to learn, that too is part of your education. So how should you educate your kids? Now, this is a question I love. When we think about educating our children, and let's go back to the early, your early years where you're teaching them to read, write, do math, those types of things, your basic skills. Well, you might have ideas of how you should educate your children. You might think that it looks like school. You might think, even if you're homeschooling, your children should be sitting down at a desk or a table every day, learning from a book or a computer program. But did you know there are many different styles of homeschooling? There are a lot of ways to approach education. And I want you to check the link in this video, or even just check this for the article, because I also have a link to different styles of homeschooling so you can learn more about that. But there are so many ways to help your children become educated. So I just want you as a homeschooling parent to not pigeonhole yourself in to thinking it needs to look like it does in school, because I'm here to tell you it doesn't. That can work in some instances. In other instances, you have to have a different approach. And then, who tells us how to be educated? In the sense of education equaling schooling, our governments tell us how to be educated. They tell us to go to school. If you're a homeschooling parent, there are laws and so forth around that. They tell you how they want things to be done. And I want to encourage you again to check the link that goes with this video, because in the article that goes with this, I have a link to an excellent book that I believe every parent and every educator should read, because what it will help you see is how schooling is about more than what's on the surface, the education. It's about training a society, about really indoctrinating a society to think, behave in a certain way. And I can tell you, as I go back to like when I was a PE teacher, this is why I decided to homeschool my kids. Because as a teacher, and I'm here to say, I think teachers are well-meaning by and large. I can tell you, I did not go into teaching thinking, oh, I'm teaching kids how to line up and how to raise their hands to speak and to help them quit thinking for themselves. But I'm here to tell you that when I started seeing the public education system through a mother's eyes, as I was pregnant with my very first child, I started recognizing these things, those things that bothered me so much about children waiting to be told what to do and what to think and never questioning what I offered to them, or rarely questioning, I should say. But it just opened my eyes and it bothered me. And I was part of that system of training our children in a certain way that ultimately I don't agree with and I don't like. But I didn't see it back then. I didn't see it. But I can tell you that every day that I homeschool my children, and I have one child that's out of the house now, I see it more clearly. I see how we have all been so well trained in our society and how it impacts our children. And I'm simply asking you to question everything you believe to be true about education. And maybe you're going to decide that that is true. Or maybe you're going to decide that all the things you believe, maybe you don't agree with so much now that you've given it more thought. Because really, it's not your fault if you haven't thought through this. We were all well trained to not think about these things. So give it some thought. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm ready for those to explode as this video gets more views. And definitely go comment in the blog post that goes with this article. I always love it when you comment on Homeschool Think Tank's website. All right, I want to offer to you that I am a certified life coach and a homeschool consultant. So if you have questions about homeschooling, you can book a complimentary consultation with me. If you are perhaps struggling with homeschooling even, or maybe you're struggling with the decision as to whether to homeschool your children or not, book a consultation with me and I will help you. All right, that's it for today. Again, my name is Jackie and I am the founder of Homeschool Think Tank and the host of the Homeschool Think Tank video channel and podcast. Bye-bye. Oh, I always say this at the end. Live and learn your way. Bye-bye.